And we're live, broadcasting from the shadows of New York City. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm. I'm so delighted you can join us for our unique podcast community where we explore the issues and challenges in the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. And this whole week, we've had some really wonderful international colleagues. We were in Poland yesterday, and today's two wonderful guests come from Melbourne, Australia. So it's the first time we've had anyone from our friends down under, and we're delighted that Susan Eldridge and Ingrid Martin can join us today. Welcome.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
You guys are broadcasting from the future, which I love, 16 hours ahead of us. So delightful.
We're also broadcasting from the very glamorous location of our basement in the future.
Me too, actually. So it's funny how that despite geography and our time difference, we are in similar circumstances in the COVID, the post-apocalyptic COVID world. So what is the state of arts and life in Australia these days?
Well, we're in Melbourne and we've had a slightly different experience to the rest of the country. So we spent most of last year, apart from a brief period, in two pretty heavy lockdowns. So just like most places elsewhere, the arts were pretty much completely shut down in operating in the normal way that we were used to pre-COVID. But as with everywhere else, there's been lots of creativity and fantastic, innovative, interesting ways of people kind of keeping the arts going and keeping the arts alive through that time. And around the rest of the country, things have been starting to open up for quite a while. COVID was less intense around the rest of the country. And we've got some professional music organizations that are already playing to halls with 75% capacity with socially distanced musicians. So it's kind of the whole spread here.
Fantastic. It's great to hear that. So why don't we go through and talk a little bit about both of your individual artistic journeys?
Great. Well, if we start way back in the 1970s, and I'll be quick, I actually grew up playing music in community settings. I'm a horn player, but grew up in brass bands. And I think, being a classical musician now, it's quite, most classical musicians come from like the youth orchestra model. And I come from community music making, so I think that gives me a different view on things. And I did a music degree, had a pretty bad experience, which is not uncommon for people who, are maybe not the best on their instrument in the school. And I left music altogether and ended up having a career in business in Europe and founded and built a multi-million-dollar tech consulting company. Because that's what you do when you fail your music degree, is you come and do something else.
You make a lot of money.
A lot, yeah. And I did that, was in that career in business for quite a few years and then moved back to Australia and really needed to unpack this story I'd been telling myself that I was a failure as a creative person. So I stepped back into music after a very long time and went back to grad school in my 40s, which is really unusual. As a performance major, everybody thought I was someone's mum. When I turned up in class, they were like, it's bring your parent to school day. So I did a performance degree as a very mature age student and really realized that my perspective from like service-oriented music making and in business was going to help me in this space around talent development and reforming how we train and how we prepare musicians and the way they work in the world. So that's the work that I do now, is I really specialize in helping musicians to thrive and in building programs and systems that get the best out of musicians. So yeah, I do that in college settings, like I have a professor job at university, and I do that for the professional sector, working with orchestras and venues as well, helping them to help their people unlock their own potential. So that's what I do now.
I love when people can put together multiple ideas and new innovations and combine that with music and make something new and special. And congratulations on a very interesting career. And boy, the tech is so important now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like ERP software, which is completely unrelated to any of the tech that we have to use as musicians. Like if you need an SQR coded for your payroll interface, probably can help, build a scope for that. But it's really useless when I'm trying to make a podcast about musicians.
Well, nothing's ever wasted, I found, as I was originally a public school teacher, did my doctorate in master's in conducting, and then jumped into the opera world and did lots of that type of conducting. But, the things I learned as a music educator and the skill of running rehearsals and doing it every day, 3 times a day, really was helpful. And it's amazing how your other life can inform what you do now, and it's they cross-pollinate each other.
Yeah, I agree. And Ingrid's also had a very non-linear career trajectory to here as well.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
so I've got interesting things that cross-pollinate as well. So I grew up playing, also a horn player, playing French horn in high school and also violin, and was super involved, one of those really nerdy music kids. And at the end of high school, I loved academics as well and science, and I kind of couldn't decide between doing medicine and music. And I ended up going down the medicine path, and I went to medical school. And at the same time, I got interested in conducting and happened to serendipitously pick up a job conducting a community student group in my first year of college. So I conducted all the way through medical school and played all the way through. And then when I finished, I knew I wanted to keep going with music. So I went back and did a 1-year music course, and then I worked in the emergency department at the local hospital on a Sunday to help pay the rent, and the rest of the time I was conducting. And then I got involved in schools, conducting with a really fantastic high school program, and the conducting just started to take off. And I moved to the US and did a master's in conducting at the University of Minnesota. And since I've been back, the stethoscope has been stuck on the shelf over there gathering dust. And I've spent my time doing conducting, and in the last couple of years building resources for conductors and helping conductors and music teachers who conduct be better at what they do for their students.
How has the medical training you received, how does that inform what you do as a musician, and how do those two intersect?
Great question.
I think one of the things that it's really informed is my general idea of what teaching and conducting is, and this idea that we meet people, students of whatever age, whether it's the elementary school students or the 80-year-olds in a community ensemble, that we meet students at whatever point in their life, and that to really treat people as a whole person in whatever way that you interact with them. That was a very strong part of my training. And thinking about this idea of seeing a challenge or a problem, whatever it is, diagnosing it, and then trying to find the right treatment, which is basically what conducting is. You're up on the podium and you're listening, and all your senses are alert to what's going on, to try and get whatever it is that you're hearing to match with whatever it is that the composer's intention was, and what you believe is the potential of the ensemble in front of you. And it's about trying to find what is the right prescription or the right combination of prescriptions to get that there. And part of that prescription is often so much about psychology. And working with patients is exactly the same thing. If you've got someone that needs to make some massive change in their lifestyle, that's going to be a long ongoing journey that's about building trust and understanding them and where they're at and being patient, and all of those things are exactly the same as teaching in any context.
So different prescription, but the same idea. I like that. That's really good. It's like watch your intonation and call, and come back in 6 weeks.
Take 2 B flats and call me in the morning.
So how has both of your unique career paths? Do you guys does that energy? Do you guys inspire each other?
Yes. I think we're both really curious people, and having had a non-linear, non-traditional journey to the kind of traditional work that we do now of conducting in classical music and leading in classical music, really allows us to question why we're doing things, because we're not bringing those anchors of I've had 27 years of doing it this way because that's the way my teacher did it. It really allows us to come at it with a sense of curiosity and say, well, why are we doing it this way? And is there a better way of doing that? So I think it really allows us to question things in a very respectful but deep way. And I think also we really like both being advocates for all of the people that we interact with, to say, like, there's no one journey, there's no one path, there's no one model of success that you really can determine, especially now in a post-COVID reality. You can and you need to determine what success is going to be for you, and own that as your story, instead of being, oh, I'm not the one thing that the school told me success was, which is primarily being paid to play, because that is so statistically such a rare outcome, but it's the one thing that's on the front cover of all the brochures or the websites. So I think that's what we are really passionate about, is just telling our story so that others who might be struggling in the way that we both have struggled with identity around, how do we call ourselves musicians if it's only a part of our income but our biggest passion. So I think that's something that we bring from having done things a bit differently, that we try and help others with.
It's beautiful. And so keep going, Ingrid.
I was going to say, I think the other thing that we really enjoy about working together is the craziness and the speed at which crazy ideas happen.
Yeah.
Because we're able to bounce off each other. And one game that we love to play is what you could do. And I think this comes from this perspective of, us both having time outside music and outside the arts, that we bring in these other perspectives and think of wild things that, maybe if we had been in that music or art sphere for our whole life and career, we might not have been able to think out of the box in that way. So we love playing kind of thought experiments and crazy games of ideas of, for example, how can we, help the arts through COVID, or whatever the challenge might be.
It's wonderful. I think about some of the greatest composers and musicians who worked with professionals, obviously, but also worked with amateurs. I'll look at the Gustav Holst, and you look at Ralph Vaughan Williams, and I think that it's so important that that you have the ability to affect more than just the professional musicians, that the community members, that the students, the people on the way up. I just think it's really a healthy attitude to work with, the broad and diverse. Be a broad and diverse resource for people all over the spectrum of music.
I think it's also really important, Jason, particularly for players or singers as well, to be able to define what is joy in music making. Like, I've played with professional symphony orchestras, right? And I've done, I freelance as well. So I have done lots of pay to play, and I get far less enjoyment out of that than I do on a Thursday of playing with a local community band who are just a gorgeous. They're there because they're so passionate about it, and we take our kids, and it's really joyful. And I take my musicianship when I'm in that chair. Look, we might be playing an arrangement of Hans Zimmer. It might be Pirates of the Caribbean again. But I'm going to take my artistry in that moment, and I'm less than 10 cents above or below being in tune. I'm playing with the best sound I can. So all the stuff I was playing a Shostakovich symphony with an orchestra, all of the professionalism that I take, working with a professional symphony orchestra, I can bring that with me, and I can be the best damn French horn player they've ever heard. And I'm sitting there with my kids because I'm so happy when I'm doing that. And I think that's what a lot of professional musicians have lost, is where is joy and happiness in their music making, because they're really focused on, am I getting paid to do this? So I talk a lot about that story, that, what does professional mean to you? And we've kind of hung this thing that professional means getting paid. And I don't necessarily think that's just the only way of measuring that. So
and these days, we're in New York City, for example, the Metropolitan Opera and Broadway none of them are working. They're all on unemployment. No one's working. So creative artists don't stop being creative because they stop being paid. And I think so many of us are wrestling with that, is how do we become and remain creative artists at this time period when so much has changed economically and for health reasons. I mean, there's just, people are doing it. They're just recreating different ways of being innovative and creative.
I think that's something I can really relate to, particularly as a conductor, and for you, Jason, as a conductor as well. Like, our work that was our bread and butter every day has been completely gone. I think I might get to go back on the podium at school maybe in a couple of weeks.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. But it's probably going to clock over about a year of no conducting, and that's something that I've really struggled with. Like, I know lots of people have, of what does that mean for me? I'm feeling quite nervous about going back. Am I going to remember how to do this? I feel rusty. At the same time as being excited for that feeling of making music together and us being live and in person and being surrounded with that sound, that thing that we're all missing. But it is a really challenging time, I think, for all artists, particularly artists that their work depends on being together. And I think what we've seen through this time, which has been really interesting, is maybe people that weren't exploring solo music making are now doing that, because that's one of the more easy outlets to continue doing that with, and they've started to build a practice around that. There's other people that I think have used this time to be more introspective and think about, well, why am I doing this now that I have this enforced fermata in my life, in my musical practice?
Caesura.
Right, yeah, that's true. It's more of a caesura right now. It's gone beyond the fermata stage. And to think about, okay, well, now that I've got this unintended pause, which I can't control, how am I going to move forward after this moment? Because there will be an after this moment. We will get back to a place where we're all, doing what we love to do. But we have a choice about whether we're going to do it the same as we always did it before, or whether we're going to take things that we've learned about ourselves and about the music and about critically thinking about the way we did stuff in the past. And, are we going to bring that into the way that we do things in the future?
So what are some of the innovations and discoveries that each of you have made during this period? I know this is our 90th episode of Music Matters, and each of the artists have such a different reaction. Some people have done tons of technology work. Some people have done tons of virtual projects. Some have done tons of reading and learning new languages. I'm always so interested to see how creative artists react to this time period.
I've actually found it really, really difficult, and have been at a lot of the time actually quite paralyzed by knowing what to do, because I had an almost full-time college teaching job up until the end of 2019, where I was running an entrepreneurship program that I'd founded and teaching, and the fit was not right. The work was making me unwell. And so I left that job intending that 2020 was going to be completely freelance consulting to higher education and orchestras about how to be better. And that was really, unsuccessful. Because they're so worried. They're worried about making payroll. They're not thinking about what does 20 years from now look like. And that's really where I wanted, even though that is also part of this conversation of what are the changes that we make to get us through this next 18 months, but how does that set us up for a legacy for 20 or 25 years for our business model and our artistic vision. So I've found that really hard, because people's bandwidth, they're just, you were talking earlier, Jason, about some challenges that's happening at your school. Everybody's contracted. Their staffing and their payroll is contracted. So the decision makers in these organizations are so overwhelmed. I've found it really hard to figure out how to serve these people with my expertise when they are so overwhelmed with the decisions they're having to make about keeping the doors open and paying their staff. Personally, they're suffering, they're experiencing trauma and grief and survivor guilt about, I'm one of the few people that's left that's got a job in my workplace. So I've actually found it really hard to try and figure out how to just be available and supportive to that community of decision makers. So look, I made a couple of podcasts last year about innovation in higher education. I've tried lots of things that have given me joy and connection, but have been spectacularly unsuccessful from a business point of view. So I've had lots of trying and failing, basically. So 2020 for me was about how do I build my resilience when the thing that I am convinced is going to change other people can't cut through. And that's probably the same whether you're trying to build an audience for your solo violin channel or whatever it is you're trying to do, that it's really challenging. And so instead of how do I change that measure of success back to be, did I do good work for people that care? Did I serve the community that I have with the best of my ability? Am I looking after myself so that for my wife and my children, I'm being a good human? So it was really looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and trying to flip that bad boy so that success was just how I'm being in the world rather than it having any measure of maybe financial impact. Knowing that in 20 years, if this is the 2 years over a 20-year period that's tough, then that's okay. So yeah, I can't say I've created anything necessarily innovative or groundbreaking, but I've found that journey, that internal journey, has been the kind of growth and the outcome for me.
And without that, the next chapter wouldn't work. You have to make sure you
Yeah.
take care of yourself before you can plan for the chapter that will inevitably come next. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just before I say my story, I think Susan's being very modest about having not innovated. And maybe we can get a link to Susan's fabulous podcast where she interviewed all of these people that are doing amazing things in innovating their higher education music programs. Because I think there's lots of food for thought for your audience, whether they're music people or broader arts community, of incredible things that are happening in higher education across North America in particular.
How can people find that podcast?
So it's called the Progressatorium as opposed to the Conservatorium. And I'm sure, Jason, you put the links in the show notes, but you can find it it's on iTunes and Apple Podcast. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of my journey of innovations, I think similar to Susan, and I'm sure this is a pretty universal story, although maybe not that many people are talking about it, that there have been lots of failures. And I think what this whole 2020 COVID period has taught me is learning to experiment and fail, and being less afraid of doing that by virtue of doing it many times over. So similar to Susan, I think I've had lots of different ideas for things to serve people or to help people, and some of them have been hits and there's been lots of misses as well. I've written a couple of ebooks, one of which was quite popular, one of which was not really very popular. Yet. I've led quite a few online workshops in terms of conducting, and a lot of workshops about how to run online rehearsals, not from the point of view of we're going to try and run an online rehearsal in the same way that we ran an in-person rehearsal.
We've all learned that that's impossible.
But what are the possibilities that lie before us in this context that were not possible in an in-person rehearsal? What are the things that this online environment can actually be optimized for, and can actually be the best way of moving forward? So one particular success I had on that front was teaching this process of score reading to ensembles using online technology, pretty lo-fi technology, just a Google sheet, and making sure everyone had a PDF copy of the score on our video conferencing call. But that was something that I never would have thought to do in an in-person rehearsal. And, I've had amazing success with that. The youth orchestra that I take have asked that even when we do go back in person, if we could do this for every piece that we play before we sit down to the first rehearsal with our instruments. And the way that helps them have a much deeper, better understanding of the entire piece of music and the score, and kind of looking at it more from a conductor's point of view than from the player's point of view, which, you know, you get your one line and you've got your one little puzzle piece and you're expected to figure out what the entire picture on the lid of the puzzle box looks like just by ear, and with no other reference point apart from this little thing. And so them getting to see the score and learn how to read a score and get to know the journey of the entire piece before they sit down to play or sing it has been an exciting learning opportunity for me that I'll definitely take moving forward. And I think from a personal point of view, that idea of beginning again is what I'm taking forward into 2021. You know, things seem well here, but as we know, everything could change on a dime with all of this, and it has many times. So being more flexible rather than rigid in planning, I think, has been helpful. Getting used to, as a conductor, we really like to control things. And 2020 and 2021, I'm sure is going to be the same, has taught me a lot about being more cognizant of what I can and can't control, and being able to feel better because I'm more aware of that.
All such important discoveries, and I love the idea of this, having the ensemble look at the forest before digging right into the trees, the individual trees, and to see the whole forest, and instead of counting 20 bars rests, is to hear what's happening in the brass section, or the conversations that go on between sections, which are so important, and which leads to higher higher level thinking in music, more than just your part, but seeing your part in the whole. That's really a great discovery.
Yeah, and I think what happened, Jason, was so the youth orchestra that I was president and Ingrid's artistic director, is we sort of stood back and said the ensemble wanted to keep going, and so did we, and so we said, well, what is a rehearsal for anyway? So completely forgetting the idea of being on mute and Ingrid conducting and everybody playing like this. It's actually not, it's not teaching and it's not learning. But what we found through this process, and we were rehearsing all through last year, we even put on a non-concert, was what we discovered was what happens in people's heads. That's what we discovered. And
it was not what we thought.
Yeah.
Like it was not at all what I thought was going on. You know, despite my best intentions and what I was trying to do from a teaching point of view on the podium, that wasn't necessarily getting through in the way that I anticipated or intended. And that was absolutely fascinating to hear, you know, despite all that teaching of what we were just discussing of, you know, understanding your role in the music and knowing what's going on around you and listen for this cue before your entrance. And yet we had people saying through this score process and lots of other activities, oh, this is so much better than counting 9 bars rest. And, you know, I would have assumed from working with these people for several years that they would kind of be not beyond that point. And so just have this opportunity to slow down and really get to know everyone on an individual level through these online rehearsals, and to actually like dig deep and ask some challenging questions that were challenging for me to ask, because it was kind of threatening to my, you know, I guess how I felt competent as a teacher, or had I done a good job as a conductor. But to say, you know, like, what is your experience? Like, what are you thinking about? And to kind of discover, oh, well, these are the things that put me, you know, as a string player in panic mode. And the only thing that I am thinking about is like moving my fingers and my bow, and I'm looking at that one bar. There is no way that I can have any awareness beyond like that one little couple, like an inch on the piece of paper, was really eye-opening and has completely transformed what we will do moving forward, and what we did do with that online rehearsal time to expand that awareness. We had 2 Alexander technique lessons online during our rehearsal activities to help them become more aware of their physical selves and how that was playing into what was going on, both in an ensemble rehearsal context, but then also just in their everyday lives. Because again, everyone's going through this mass trauma experience, and becoming more aware of what's going on.
And they need music. The fact that these people need music. It's just we have to reimagine what's possible, what this modality can do. And Susan, as an educational higher ed person who's been delving with these questions of how to improve music's impact on people's lives, it's really interesting how the virtual online platform really does lend itself. There's no geography involved. There's no. I know from this show, 60% of my audience tends to be international, and I'm just amazed that what reach you can have with the virtual platforms, which is really kind of surprising to me.
I think what we discovered, actually, Jason, through my college teaching and the work I've been doing with organizations around the world and with this youth orchestra, is that music is the channel. So what they need more than they need music is they need each other. Is they actually need meaningful connection, and they need to be seen and they need to be heard. And music was the mechanism for them to do that. So that's actually what we've discovered. And that's the basis of all of our work now, is how do we create a psychologically safe space and whoever we're working with and whatever we're doing, for people to be seen and be heard, because then we have meaningful connection and we can develop empathy, and honesty and truth comes out. And that's the basis of music making, as well as trust. So that's actually what we've really discovered, is what people need is to be seen and heard. And in a large ensemble or a lecture room, if there's 80 or 180 or 880 people, it's really hard to do that. But we can actually do that in this digital environment with however many people are on the call, with breakout room technology and different facilitation techniques. So I think that's really actually been a gift, is for leaders and decision makers who've decided, it doesn't need to be one to many. How do we make this much more collaborative in this environment? And because they can't hide, like they used to sit up, like the tuba player sits up the back, or the baritone's up the back of the baritone section in the choir. But we can see everybody from kind of shoulders to the top of their head. There's no hiding anymore. So I think that's a really amazing gift, is how do we leverage this opportunity to make real connection with people?
And even for people to make connection with each other, like say, for example, within like a workshop or an ensemble, whatever it might be. Like we've had people in ensembles we've worked with, like a percussionist, say, oh, the amazing thing about Zoom is now I know what everyone's face looks like instead of the back of their head. And they
Good
said,
point.
I didn't know what someone's face was, and I couldn't put a name to their face because I never see their face. And yet on Zoom, I can see everyone's face. I can see everyone's name underneath. And, that's the same for every ensemble. It's just thinking about how it's changed the spatial dynamics, and how the spatial dynamics affect the social dynamics of a group is something that, I'm going to take forward whenever we do get back into a room. We've already decided that our first orchestra rehearsal, everyone is going to be in a circle and everyone is going to see each other. And, there might be moments when that is not the best way to rehearse for everyone's listening, but that's how we want to start, because we deliberately do not want to start in the same physical setup as when we were last in person.
It's amazing how these large-scale philosophical debates, and how important community, that reminded me of this summer. I'm used to having a very large choral community where we do a big festival in my town of Ocean Grove, New Jersey. We have usually 1,000 singers come together, and 6,000 in the audience sing together, choir anthems. And we had to rethink how I could do that. And we did everything. We had like 60 to 100 people, and twice a week for Zoom calls, trying to make it relevant and trying to there was so much more discussion about the music. There was so much more. I did some rehearsing with them on mute, and give some pointers and things to think about as they practiced and put them together. But it's not the same. But I really, talking to them and having them bring forth ideas and to hear people just needed to feel like they're part of something. It's so important that the community be maintained, and that's really, has been like the center of my mission with my university students and my community choruses and my orchestra, and is finding ways to engage that way.
I think also, Jason, for those of us who were not hard wedded to the process, who were willing to embrace what might be possible, is we've all started asking lots more questions of our who we're for, like you were saying, connecting with people. And so when we've been able to change things in this new environment, like Ingrid talked about, how do we not slingshot back with the same cues and clues to the way we used to do things when we go back in person? So I've been thinking about this with my college teaching work, right? So one of the subjects I teach is for classical music students, composers, vocalists, instrumentalists, who want to either have a career as in music management, in arts management, or for whom they want to run their own self-managed chamber ensembles, right? So they're going to be leaders and decision makers. And one of the things in talking to industry about the gap between graduate skills, like what can and can't they do, and then working with the students, one of the things that both groups said is we need our early career people to be better at participating and leading in meetings, because that, if you're a chorister, or if you're a singer or an instrumentalist in music school, you get told what to do as part of a herd, right? You never lead. So one of the things that I'm implementing, our school year is just starting now because we run the calendar year, is that particular subject, I'm going to run the entire 12-week program as staff meetings, team meetings. And the students are going to be allocated a week when they are CEO of the week, and they have the schedule that they have to send out to everybody, which is the class roster. They're responsible for calling the meeting. So all the stuff we would do in a team meeting in a professional environment, which is what they have to do when they leave, we're going to model that in the classroom. So I'm not having lectures or classes. We're having staff meetings, team meetings now every week. And so we're going to, like, that came out of purely being more open to asking people what's the gap for you, and then how do I build that bridge for you. So yeah, I'm abandoning lectures and going to team meetings with all my college students this year.
Well, it seems like you're both empowering your communities of artists, and I think that's an incredible and noble thing that you're both doing. What do both of you think are some of the things that, as we move forward, that we're going to bring into this next chapter? How does music rebound in Australia and the world?
That's such a good question. I think, as we were just talking about, one of the things that this period has prompted is for us to ask a lot of questions. And I think the biggest loss would be if we stopped asking those questions. And so I think, maintaining this open mind and curiosity and critical appraisal of what we do from moment to moment and on a much shorter time scale. I think, for most of us, we work in an environment that might be on, operating on a season calendar for an ensemble, or on a semester basis, or an academic year. And, I think a lot of us, we finish a class or we finish a rehearsal, and we might have, back in the day when we sat in a car, jumped in the car and, gone over in our head what happened. But we maybe didn't have like a formal process for, constantly reevaluating what we're doing. And I think, that's one of the things that I'm taking from this period moving forward, is more constant evaluation and not feeling, again, rigid or wedded to a particular plan. If I could make a slight shift and make it better on the go, then surely that's going to be eventually a better outcome for everyone, because there's going to be this continuous improvement. So for me, I think it's going to be about that idea of flexibility and constantly reevaluating what's happening, and constantly questioning my own process. Why am I doing this? Is this still serving the people that I'm intending to serve? Is this still going to get the outcome that I want? And being less judgmental about it and more about, how can we continually make this better?
As a fellow conductor, in the past it was all about, the process is so important, the rehearsal process, and then we have the deadline of the concert or performance. It changes the whole paradigm when things got off kilter, and we all had to grapple with that. And that's such an interesting description of your process. Thank you, Ingrid.
Yeah, I think also, I would love ensembles to, just quickly on what you were both saying, is to say to themselves, well, who are we for and why do we exist? Because if they're a community, I know in Australia, all of the community ensembles here run on a earned revenue is their operating budget, and they have no cash reserves. And so they're really struggling with, a lot of them are saying, well, we have no money in the bank, we can't continue. But if you're thinking that our job is to play concerts, instead of actually what are we for and why are we here, and if they were honest with themselves and they said, actually, why we're here is to come together on a Thursday night and make music, then forget about the hassle of the concert, because sometimes there's more people in the ensemble than there is in the audience. So why are we spending all our precious resources of our volunteer community in this product when it's actually the process and the people that are most important? So I would love to see, particularly the community music fraternity, asking themselves, why do we exist? What purpose do we serve in the lives of our community? And do we need to boomerang back to the way we used to do things? Because, we used to do 8 rehearsals in a concert. I think the thing for me that seems to have changed the most is on the professional end of town, we used to rely on the gatekeepers. So, whether that was the organization of the choir or the opera or the orchestra that booked us. So there were all these gatekeepers between us and who we serve, right? And the training model for classical musicians really never asks us to think about who we serve. I'm making a gross generalization, but I'm, someone who's been working in the system for quite a long time. It's really very self-serving, right? And what I think this whole thing has uncovered is artists who are willing to say, oh, it can't just be about me anymore. I now have to ask myself, who am I for? For whom do I do this? And what does the transformative musical experience that I can create for them look like? And so that's what I'm seeing, is lots of stuff that used to be very focused on, it's the same thing as a teacher. It's the difference between what do I want to teach and what do they need to know? And do I know what they need to know because I've asked them, rather than made a gross assumption about what they need to know as well. So that's what I'm hoping will go forward, is this realization of people that we serve, and who do we serve and what do they need. Great example is the community orchestra that we run. We did this online concert, which it really didn't involve any live music making. But as with most community groups, the audience are friends and family of people in the group, right? And we said, and this is it's probably the most innovative community ensemble in the country. We were going to do a concert, basically like a live aerobics class with the instructor, and the orchestra were playing the music, and we've done all sorts of crazy collaborations with scientists and stuff. But we had the audience come for this concert, and again, design thinking, saying to them, tell us what's we knew from the analytics they were all people that had come to a lot of our performances before, and we said, what's a memorable experience that we've created for you? And we were thinking they were going to say, oh, the time you played Jim Stevenson's oboe concerto, or all these things that, all the world commissions that Ingrid's done, or these innovative collaborations. And they all said, oh, the time we had a sing-along to Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive as the encore to the 1990s tribute concert. And we were like, but what about all the legit musical stuff we've done? And so that's what they said was the only time we created an experience for them to be one with the ensemble was the thing that stuck with them the most.
And in this actual concert itself that we did on Zoom, we asked them, oh, like what have you enjoyed about today? And it was the same thing that the timpanist had said of, oh, well, we read the program and we see the names, but we don't know who anyone is. And on this Zoom call, we got to see everyone, with their T-shirt and their instrument, and it had their name, like Teresa violin, and they're like, oh, that's who that person is. Like, apart from the one person that they came to see that they know, they're like, oh, now we can put faces to names, and we're so excited to know who everyone is. And it was the same for us. We've seen their names on the ticketing data, when the ticket orders come through, and then we could say, oh, that's John that always is like the first person to order all the tickets. Now we know what John looks like.
Christine Robinson, the oboe player's mum, that's always the first one to buy when they're released. We now know what she looks like. So that's going to be great when we are back in person, that the connection between, like, we know each other now in a way that we weren't able to, and we wouldn't have made the time to do that previously. So that's what I'm hoping we can all take forward, is this, like, the meaningful connection between people, instead of just playing at people. We now know who we're playing for.
Well, you're both very deep servants of the art form, people who really have deep thoughts about this, and your philosophical searching is really going to pay dividends to your community as life goes on. So keep on having those questions and keep on delving into that, because it makes such a difference in people's lives. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much.
Again, how can we find out more about each of your work individually?
Well, my website is conductingartistry.com, and there are courses, there's a podcast, a blog, and lots of resources for conductors, both for online rehearsing, if you are still living in the world of online rehearsing like most of us are, and then in the time when we joyfully get back to in-person, there's lots of resources, videos and things for people on conductingartistry.com.
So firstly, Jason, thank you for these conversations that you're fostering with others, and for the gift to the community that these create. So thank you for doing that. And people can find me at Notable Values. So that's NOTABLE Values. And you can find out about my work. And yeah, I really would love to hear from anybody who is interested in, like, I love coaching people particularly. And it's a great passion I have, of helping people one-to-one. So you can find out about, notablevalues.com. You can find me there. And I'd love to hear from anyone who maybe what we've talked about today's resonated with them, see how we can support them and continue to serve our communities together.
Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to keeping in touch as time goes on, and wishing you and all of Australia, and Melbourne in particular, a happy return to live music.
Thanks, Jason.
And likewise for you in New York.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topic. Our next show will be tomorrow at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We have an author, Howard J. Smith, who's the author of Finding Mozart. It's a fictionalized account about Da Ponte, a very interesting and scandal-ridden personality who collaborated with Mozart. And please check us out on social media and share our videos. And remember, keep music alive. Good night.